This is my audience, 1, 2, and 3. My name is Savannah Middleton, and this is my persuasive speech. The issue I wish to address today is abusive behaviors and attitudes in today's society, which is rooted in hate and leads us away from God. Imagine walking into a public place and everyone's covered in bruises and black eyes. Imagine school-aged children throwing punches instead of insults. Spouses slapping one another. Physical abuse is loudly noticeable and it leaves scars. Today, society is plagued with abusive behaviors and attitudes, and though they are not as physically noticeable, they are just as harmful. According to the 2014 Children's Defense Fund's State of American Children Report, 1,825 children are abused or neglected each day in the U.S., and a child is killed by abuse or neglect every 5.5 hours. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, every 107 seconds another American is sexually assaulted. Abuse comes in many forms, affecting many people as a weapon of hate, which interferes with God's desire for humanity. As a Christian, I understand how important it is to make a priority of God's values in our everyday life. I also know as a human being how easy it is to sometimes adopt behaviors and attitudes in our culture that may be abusive without realizing it. Abuse is a major social issue, which influences our behaviors and attitudes as a whole. It diminishes love and safety, which God desires for us as humanity to experience. Shedding light upon this problem, and instead practicing love and respect, we can dramatically reduce the prevalence of abuse. I will validate this statement, explaining various types of abuse, why abuse can occur without us knowing, and then that it's rooted in hate, and that the solution to this problem is to practice love and respect, which are God's values. Let's begin by exploring various types of abuse. Society is plagued by abusive behaviors and attitudes. More commonly known, physical abuse. It can be defined as the use of physical force that may result in bodily harm, injury, or impairment. Emotional and psychological abuse, which is harder to notice, is defined by Healthy Place website as, quote, any act including confinement, isolation, humiliation, intimidation, verbal assault, and other treatment that diminishes sense of self and self-dignity. Sexual abuse and harassment is any act that violates an individual in a sexual manner. Hatred and disrespect against another is in the most basic form abuse. Now let's explore some common popular behaviors of emotional and verbal abuse. Abusive attitudes and behaviors occur so often that they happen unconsciously. Social media and the internet is a prime location where abuse runs rapid these days. Behind an impersonal screen, many young children bully their peers without realizing that these behaviors are indeed abusive. Name-calling, emotional abuse, ridicule, tearing down one another based on physical appearance, judgment, these are all commonplace. According to the Pew Research Center, 4 in 10 internet users are victims of harassment. This too is abuse. Judgment, disrespect that is shown to our peers, family, strangers, is abuse, mistakenly disguised as a bad attitude or in a bad mood. But indeed, this is abuse. Abuse comes in many forms, and there are many opportunities for us as a society to unconsciously adopt these behaviors. Fortunately, there is a solution. a solution to an abusive society is to understand it's rooted in hatred and that God values love and respect for one another. In John 13:34, it is said, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, and you also love one another." In 1 Peter 2:17, "Honor all people and love the brotherhood, fear God and honor thy king." In Proverbs 10:12, it is stated that hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. Honoring these values, we can implement them into our everyday life and social interactions. This will dramatically reduce most abusive behaviors and attitudes. Abuse is rooted in hate. We merely need to exercise love and compassion socially. Also important is to recognize that disrespect is disobedience to God. This will leave less room for abusive treatment if we can remember to be respectful. Now, as I wrap up my main points, I would like to summarize my conclusion. Society tends to be disrespectful and abusive at times, even without realizing it's abuse. Physical, emotional, psychological abuse are both fueled by hatred. Speaking down to peers, ridiculing, judgment, disrespect, the me versus them mentality that is adopted by many in our society, all leads us away from God and towards hatred. This is far from what God desires for humanity to experience. Making love and respect core priorities in our everyday lives and interactions is a powerful solution to an abusive culture. These things are easy to do. Respecting all others is easy to do when we keep in mind that we are all from the image of God. Remember one of the greatest commandments that's given to us in 1 John 4:7-10. "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knows God." Do not be tricked into thinking that harmful actions are not abusive, because in the eyes of God they are. Hold yourself and others accountable for how you treat one another. I ask all of you to analyze your past interactions, and in doing so, ask yourself these 3 simple questions. Would I say or think these words to or about myself? Is this interaction in alignment with being a redemptive communicator? And lastly, since man is created in the image of our Holy Father, would I interact in the same manner to God? Doing these simple things, we can each individually and personally reduce the amount of abusive attitudes and behavior in our culture.